I will get us started. My name is Barney Rosenberg. I'm your senior judge today. And in this part of the competition, you're taking on a fictional business identity and assigning to us, the judges, similarly, a business identity. And I saw in your executive summary that we are the board of directors of Apple. Big promotion for me. So please make sure that everybody knows who you are in your roles and who they are before we begin. You're going to have 25 minutes to describe all three, the legal, financial, and ethical dimensions of the problem you've identified, and to recommend a solution that passes muster on all three counts. During this time, the teams will not be interrupted. When you're finished, we will stay in character, and as judges, as members of the board, we will ask you questions, and we can do that for 10 to 15 minutes. After that, you'll take a deep breath. We'll step out of our fictional roles. We can provide you with some feedback and tell you something about ourselves and what our backgrounds are as the judges. So let me know whenever you're ready. I will keep time and let you know when there's about 2 minutes to go.
Perfect. Thanks very much. I'll just share my screen and get set up here. Perfect. Everyone else is good to go? Awesome. Good evening to the Apple Board of Directors. While technology has changed all of our lives, there is a pressing dilemma: the dark side of consumer electronics, e-waste, and the right to repair. My name is Nicole, and I'm here with my colleagues Mark, Stephen, and Shoria, and together we are Bright Light Consulting. And today we will navigate the complexities of this issue and propose a solution that honors Apple's legacy of innovation while embracing our collective responsibility for a sustainable future. Apple has become a massive tech icon through its key strengths. With its market cap bigger than the GDP of 25 countries around the world, you have been able to grow to influential tech heights, just behind Amazon with your $352 billion revenues. We know that iPhones and services make up 75% of this. Using your key strengths of tech and brand image, you've been able to bring over 2 billion users into your powerful ecosystem. That's 25% of the global population. Apple, your closed ecosystem is built off your core offerings of software, hardware, and services through control of various repair rules, app review processes, and limited compatibility. This is really the root of Apple's philosophy: complete control over all of these to safeguard, to protect the user experience, and to protect proprietary innovation. This closed ecosystem was really built because of the competition with Microsoft during the computer booming era, when Microsoft gained market quickly through standardizing their software. So you learned the thing. When it was time to enter the cell phone market, you knew that if you had software which is really well integrated with hardware, you can gain market adoption quickly and sell lots of your products while doing so. So this closed ecosystem is intentional, a deliberate choice to set a standard in the industry. However, it's essential to also recognize that it also places Apple at the heart of the right to repair debate. Proprietary hardware design and software locks, as well as the limited availability of official spare parts to third-party providers and your warranty-avoiding clauses for unauthorized repairs, are ultimately leading to defensive design and this dependency on Apple for these services. This is not only leading to increased repair costs, but also a reduced lifespan for these devices, as it's causing consumers to replace their devices rather than repair them. The results of this: a spike in e-waste and a growing distrust among consumers who seek autonomy over their own technology. There's also a conflict of rights happening between you, Apple, and your consumers. Of course, your closed ecosystem and repair restrictions are necessary to ensure the highest standards of safety, security, and performance, but it is raising questions on competitive practices and monopolistic control. Consumers and right to repair advocates argue that once a product is purchased, the owner should have the freedom to repair it through the service provider of their choice. But we also recognize your right of intellectual property protection. With that said, things are escalating. These unhappy consumers are bringing Apple to the courts. From Batterygate in 2017, where you were charged over $1.5 billion, to lengthy legal battles with repair shops. The struggle for this right to repair really is intensifying. Shareholders and consumers are now joining in, pushing back, most recently with the shareholder resolution citing potential SEC violations. Apple, you are being compelled to adapt, and the message is clear. The cost of resisting change is high, and you may face more than just financial repercussions if you don't embrace a more repair-friendly approach. While Apple's closed ecosystem has indeed generated consumer loyalty, driven technological advancement, and contributed to economic growth, what we're seeing is that there's more harm being done through the environmental damages, health risks associated from e-waste, and the heightened consumerism that's taking place because of this. But without right to repair, the global impact of e-waste is alarming. 64.3 million metric tons of electronic waste are generated each year, a figure growing by 21% annually. E-waste is now the fastest growing waste stream in the world. But unfortunately, only 17% of this is currently recycled properly, meaning that over 1,000 different chemicals are being released into the environment, many of which have detrimental effects on human health and the biodiversity. Big players such as WHO and the Basel Convention are stepping in. You might ask why? Well, they're stepping in because while we do not see the effects here, developing countries are exporting their e-waste to Africa, specifically Ghana, often labeling it as used goods to sidestep the costs of proper recycling. The images of young individuals standing amidst mountains of burning electronics should give us all a pause. This is a direct result of the improper disposal of electronics. This practice is causing sustainability issues, and there is a corporate responsibility to prioritize the longevity and repairability of products throughout their life cycle. The consequences of e-waste are affecting people, the planet, and entire communities. The informal sector handling this often involves children being employed in dangerous recycling operations. The environment suffers from persistent toxins, damaging soil, air, and water. And of course, the communities face degraded living conditions and strained healthcare challenges as a direct result. This is an ethical issue as this cycle disproportionately affects the vulnerable populations.
So, what happens when an industry fails to regulate themselves? The government steps in. And that's exactly what we have seen over here. As you can see, both the European Union and United States of America have put out different directive, laws, and legislative proposals in the last couple of years to tackle this issue, which has been brought to light thanks to consumer rights groups highlighting the issue of e-waste and the right to repair. And what has Apple's role been in this? Apple has been a passive bystander to this issue. Apple has definitely contributed to the consumerism, not directly, but through things like frequent product releases, through your annual refreshes of iPhone, features that incentivize consumers to upgrade their devices, even though it doesn't add much utility to it, and also marketing pushes. In the last couple of years, if you have visited any electronics store, you would have seen that it's very easy for consumers to be able to trade in their devices and receive a new one. As a direct result of this, Apple has been able to ship out 235 million iPhones worldwide in just 2023 only. But we also see 130 million phones being thrown away each year. And you can see from these stats that the recycling rates are not able to keep at pace with the volume at which electronics are being sold. And what this leads to is a push for overconsumption of iPhone, which then feeds into the problem of e-waste, which has now affected vulnerable communities around the world. Now, while we're not saying that Apple is directly responsible for causing this issue, you are complicit with the production of devices and overconsumption. And while I must applaud Apple for their variety of sustainable development goals initiatives, some of which are listed on the screen, we will talk in depth about Goal 8, which promotes inclusive and sustainable economic growth. Apple, you have aided to job creation through App Store ecosystem, as well as your work with supplier programs to respect labor and human rights in your supply chain. Goal 12 talks about ensuring sustainable consumption production pattern. You have transitioned materials away from Apple's usual products from using for use for packaging to recycled and renewable sources. Your zero waste initiatives of product trade and recycling also aid at this. While you have done a lot of good work in this area, Goal 8 and 12 present opportunities for setting new standards in economic and environmental sustainability. Now that we have seen some of these issues, let's look at the repercussions if you fail to act in a clear way. The first issue would be alienation of customers. Your consumer group is growing, and now it encompasses Gen Zs and Gen Alpha. These consumers are ethics and sustainability focused, and they're not only growing in number, but also in their purchasing power. They already make 22% of the global population. There are legal issues persisting as well. As it was stated earlier, Apple has been hit with fines when not conforming to these regulations. And as consumer rights groups continue to advocate for them, stricter regulations are expected. And that puts you at risk of spending billions of dollars in lawsuits, as well as hindering your ability to conduct business. And this is very important for you just because the board is directly responsible and answerable to the investors. In addition, you are also disenfranchising yourself from your own identity. For long, you have been a champion of sustainability and consumer rights. And by not taking a stance on this issue, you're moving away from your own very identity. Now, we looked at your current policies regarding right to repair in depth to see whether they are ethically defensible. And when we ran them through multiple different approaches, you can see that most of this policy currently does not conform to being ethically defensible. It does not allow consumers the right to repair their own products. It affects the environment negatively. And more importantly, it doesn't allow you, Apple, to be the organization that you intend to be. While your practices used to be ethically defensible, consumers are now pushing and asking more from corporations. So this brings us to this important question. As a leader in consumer electronics industry, how can Apple redefine market trends by championing the right to repair and tackling the reduction of electronic waste that we now see as a growing issue, especially in Africa? So through our recommendations, you'll be able to target goals such as reducing legal risk, improving global sustainability, and at the same time repairing the brand image and gaining back the lost public trust. Our strategy of leaning into circular electronic life cycle through recommendations such as solving the root cause and repairing the damage are a solution to this growing problem.
So let's look a bit closer at enabling the right to repair. So in 2022, Apple launched the self-serve parts store, which allows users to purchase the parts and tools needed to do their own repairs. The program has been criticized as being overly intimidating with complex procedures and warnings every step of the way. The rental toolkit that's required for even the most basic iPhone repair, such as changing a battery, costs $50 and weighs nearly 80 pounds. The independent repair program is also restrictive and requires small businesses to sign an NDA before they can even look at the contract. Apple requires that they post signage and inform their customers that they are not an authorized service provider and that by using them, they'll be voiding their Apple warranties. In both self and independent repair, the part costs alone are also very close to the same price as just paying Apple to do the same repair. All of these issues make it difficult for a repair shop to remain viable and heavily discourages consumers from doing their own repairs. So how could Apple improve their design to make it more repairable? Let's take a look at the Fairphone 5, which is a smartphone designed to be socially responsible, user-serviceable, and long-lasting. The Fairphone parts are less than half the price of the similar part in the latest iPhone. The Fairphone battery can be replaced without tools. And without, whereas the iPhone requires specialty tools to remove the glass back and software pairing to authenticate the new battery. And the independent consumer electronics repair website, iFixit, gave the Fairphone a 10 out of 10 repairability score, while the iPhone 15 only scores a 4. This proves that it's possible to build a phone that is high-tech without sacrificing repairability. That brings me to the first part of a recommendation to solve the root cause of the problem by embracing right to repair. This recommendation has two parts. Design for repair, which will make new phones that are easier to repair and long-lasting, which will in turn keep phones running longer and reduces e-waste. Second, we recommend that you revamp the independent repair program and remove barriers to repair. This will provide social benefits by empowering small business owners and curbs consumerism. So to improve the Apple product's repairability, we suggest working to eliminate software locks, reducing the need for complex tools and adhesives, embracing modular design, and working towards a design with a user-serviceable battery. This will result in benefits that help with SDG Goal 12 by reducing e-waste, simplifying recycling by making phones easy to disassemble, and will make Apple a leader in sustainable design, with other manufacturers likely to follow suit. So to capture all the benefits from the improved repairable electronics, Apple must lower barriers to third-party and self-repair. So this includes implementing a used parts recertification program for out-of-warranty devices, streamlining and simplifying the contracts to onboard new repair shops, reducing the new parts cost, and increasing the standard warranty to 3 years, while also allowing independent repair shops to do warranty-approved repairs. This will result in economic benefits aligned with SDG Goal 8 by creating more jobs in the phone repair industry, lowering the lifetime costs for iPhone ownership, and establishing industry standards and best practices for third-party repairs. Of course, these changes will not just benefit society, but Apple stands to gain as well. The biggest impact will be an improvement to Apple's public image and brand, especially among Gen Z and Gen Alpha. It will also reduce the risk of costly and expensive legal battles around not just repairability, but all anti-competitive actions. An increased number of authorized repair shops will give Apple a competitive edge by increasing access to quality repairs. And the used parts system will keep those parts in the ecosystem longer, reducing repair costs to both consumers and Apple, who need to produce fewer spare parts. Finally, it improves consumer choice by giving customers the option of repairing their phones with Apple or independent repair, or doing it themselves, as well as the option of whether they want to use new or used parts. All of these benefits will have the overall impact of strengthening Apple's brand perception, helping to capture sustainably conscious Gen Z and Gen Alpha consumers.
Fantastic. So now that we have set you on the correct path for the right to repair, we need to address electronics that are beyond repair or have reached the end of their useful lifespan, so that we recommend a strategy of repair the damage. Unfortunately, not all electronics can be repaired. These products turn into e-waste. As said earlier, e-waste is the fastest growing waste stream globally, with 50 million tons produced annually. However, there are a lot of opportunities to be found in e-waste. Of that 50 million tons, $62.5 billion of valuable minerals are lost. Who feels the effects of this e-waste the most? Africa currently receives 60% of the world's e-waste, showing that the least fortunate groups are the ones affected most by our consumerism. As we saw at the beginning of this presentation, people in Africa, including children, burn this e-waste in pits to harvest the materials that causes environmental and human harm. However, Africa is not sitting idly by. Because of the large amounts of e-waste and the negative impacts, Africa is leading the way in e-waste recycling and policy. Governments in Africa are very willing to work with the private sector to help solve their problem, and this provides a huge opportunity for Apple to make an immediate e-waste impact. But recycling the e-waste that comes to Africa is not solving the root cause of this problem. We need to eliminate the shipment of e-waste to this country to truly make an impact. This is what it might look like. So for the items that no longer be repaired, they're not thrown out. They are instead recycled here in the USA and never make their way onto a boat and shipped off to Africa. This has huge potential to benefit not only Africa, but you as well, Apple. That is why we suggest to repair the damage. Partner with a PRO, I'll go into this in a little bit, to help clean up Africa in the short term and create an e-waste recycling facility in the US to prevent e-waste from making its way to Africa for a long-term solution. This will ensure improving the brand image and a healthier Africa. So we can break this recommendation up into 3 big steps. First, partnering with a PRO to start the cleanup immediately, build and develop recycling technologies here in the US, and fund it in a way that will guarantee success in perpetuity. So more about that PRO. The first step is to work with a producer responsibility organization. What they do is streamline compliance, generate economic growth, create jobs, and above all, oversee the collection, recycling, and disposal of e-waste. We suggest EPRON as they have a great track record and have many big registered partners from around the world. We will then monitor this partnership through regulation and bring attention to the e-waste problem and efforts, encouraging more companies to invest in this sector. This partnership allows you to take immediate steps in reducing e-waste while obtaining expertise from recycling efforts in Africa and bring them to the US. Now that we have responded retroactively, we want you to now act proactively. We know that you are already doing great things when it comes to recycling your products, but we want you to double down on that and open a recycling facility for all e-waste here in the US. We can leverage your knowledge in recycling and help to increase the already impressive 7.8 million Apple devices and 48,000 tons of e-waste diverted from the landfills that you have already done. This is just your starting point. A great example of your recycling R&D is the Daisy robot. Let's look at what your robot can do for the plan ahead. So currently, your Daisy robot dismantles 200 phones a minute, but is limited to just 15 Apple iPhones. We want to advance these capabilities so that Daisy can dismantle all the smartphones regardless of make. This will help you harvest part of that $6+ billion worth of materials that are lost every year to e-waste. This is just the beginning of the new material harvesting techniques that will be developed. And of course, this all sounds expensive, and it is, but we have a plan for that as well. So initially, the startup costs will come from you, Apple, and through government grants. But we maintain that these operations will build. We will build a price into the iPhones to maintain these operations, essentially an offset to recycle the equivalent amount of e-waste created by every iPhone product, thus completing the circular life cycle of that product. So after moving forward with our strategy, the rights of the consumer to repair their property will be enhanced, the right to your intellectual property will be maintained, and the human rights to a healthy and safe environment will be given back to the people of Africa. This is not only the ethically right thing to do, but with new legislations that we predict, it is a legal and government-supported strategy.
Right, so now let's bring it all together. You have heard our strategies, but let's talk about what would be pushing the cost associated with them. So in the first year, the cost would be driven predominantly by right to repair program that would be set up as per our framework discussed earlier. In addition, the recycling initiative through the different facilities that will be transported. So first of all, in the recycling initiative, there will be the Daisy robot, which 4 of which will be deployed in year 1, as well as the recycling facility in the US, which will cost $30 million. From there on, now that the warranties are being expanded to a term of 3 years, we expect to see a higher cost associated with them, as well as some loss in Apple Care sales. However, we expect the Apple Care sale losses to be minimal just because the two cover different types of claims. And I don't want you to think about these costs as costs specifically. They're more of investment into being able to do business the right way and for a long time. And this is what the revenue and cost avoidance projections will look like. So as mentioned multiple times in our presentation, Apple has been hit with multiple fines. 2 legislations are currently underway, which can hit further fines on Apple. So our revenue and cost avoidance essentially drives cash flow from the legal fees, litigation costs that Apple would have otherwise had to pay. And you will benefit by not having to pay those fees in the long run, as well as revenue from recycled parts and also cost offsetting from e-waste, which will be driven by iPhone sales.
2 minutes to go.
And thank you. And this is the cash flow, what it looks like. So as you can see right now, there are two main litigations that are underway, and that tell us that in year 2 and year 3, this cost avoidance will give us a net value of 270 and 93.5 million respectively. Over the course of this recommendation, there will be a net cash flow of 4 million as well as NPV of 1.31. The essence of this recommendation is to make Apple a cost-neutral initiative for you to take on these tasks.
So by embracing repairability and recycling, Apple, you're able to realign with these SDG goals 8 and 12. By addressing the root cause and repairing the damage, we can reduce harmful consumption, reduce e-waste before it lands in vulnerable communities, lead the market to more sustainable and ethical electronics industry, as well as prove that we indeed can do more and better with less. Apple, we're certain that our strategy to lean into a circular electronic life cycle will put you on the path to strengthen your position as an industry leader in sustainability for future generations. So let's get started. Thank you, and we welcome questions.
Well, as a longtime member of the board of directors of Apple, I have a suggestion for you. You're recommending that we cut our sales and increase our cost of operations. Why don't you waive your fees as consultants?
So you might have thought that we are suggesting to increase costs. However, we are suggesting that through this cycle of this circular life cycle of products and using the recycling facilities that you have, you will generate a lot of cost savings through being able to harvest your materials along with other people's or other e-waste materials and put those into your value chain, thus providing value to you and your customers. Additionally, when it comes to lowering sales, when we looked at your revenue model, we saw a very strong correlation between your devices and the services. We predict that through Gen Z and Alpha, with this better brand image of being an economic and sustainable company, your sales of phones and computers will grow, thus also correlating to a higher percentage of revenue with those services such as music, iCloud storage, and those kinds of things.
Just to add to that, so essentially we are saying that you're expanding the life cycle of your products. But one thing I would like you to keep in mind, you're essentially also allowing customers to spend more on the per unit iPhones over the lifespan of it. iPhones, as we all know, come with limited storage, which you're not able to expand. So these initiatives would allow users to spend more on App Store, get more iCloud storage, and also if a typical Apple consumer gets an iPhone before they buy any other alternative devices. So by making consumers buy more iPhones, because they see more value or that it adds in terms of having a larger life cycle, you are also incentivizing them to buy other products. So you are essentially fueling your other revenue stream by making iPhone a better product and increasing its life cycle.
Sagar?
Thank you so much. Yeah, great presentation. Really enjoyed it. Nice slides. The electronic waste and the recycling sounds really good. But how would you encourage consumers to embrace repaired and refurbished products, overcoming potential perceptions around quality and desirability of repaired phones?
That's a good question. And it's something that you as the board of Apple need to consider, because your brand has been built on reliable devices. And therefore, when we talk about the recycling initiatives, there will be a strong oversight in terms of making sure that the parts that are now being used as recycled parts go through multiple quality checks. Ensuring those quality checks and keeping those checks and balances will ensure that customers are now able to confidently pick up a phone or use recycled devices to ensure that they have a product in hand which is capable of doing just as much as your original products are. And by doing all of these things, you would show consumers the fact, first of all, that Apple cares actually about their consumers and providing maximum value to them. Apple consumers currently are offset by the fact that their iPhone becomes redundant over a course of 3 to 4 years, which is the typical life cycle of an iPhone, at which point they tend to upgrade to it. A lot of consumers then move towards Android devices, which are comparable in a lot of ways, but come at a lower cost. By showing all of these initiatives and showing the value that Apple is now adding to an already successful product, you will be able to still attract more consumers and get a bigger share of the market, something that you already are taking over at this point.
Laura, did you have any questions?
Yes, hi. As a board member of Apple, I am very intrigued by what you have said about us having been fined, but where have we been fined and how much have those fines been? And projecting forward, how much would that comparison between spending 9 million, I think you said, on lobbying versus adopting this affect us?
So I believe in our earlier slide, we stated that the fines have predominantly been in US and Europe, which is expected since those are the more regulated markets. In terms of where we expect to see more fines, we know that there is an initiative that's underway currently with the results expected to come out of EU in 2025. As well as right now, 27 states in the US have already signed legislation regarding right to repair, with others set to follow suit. So we expect to see fines all across those boards. It is logical to see that these fines would be in more regulated instances. And I'm sorry, I forget the rest of your question. Could you repeat that, please?
The cost for us as Apple between our lobbying efforts, which would include lobbying both in the European Union, at the United States, and at the UN, seeing as we're incorporating the SDG goals, which are about to be renegotiated. So lobbying there, as opposed to adopting this new technology of recycling and having a circular vision.
Yeah, so what we anticipate is because Apple does spend quite a bit to influence regulatory bodies in these different areas that we have discussed, we are suggesting that instead of fighting the change, which is set to come about, since there are multiple legislations that are being passed right now, which prohibit countries from exporting that e-waste over to Africa. Right now, that issue of e-waste is, it seems, in a distant place just because it's not close to home. But once those initiatives are signed and the companies are no longer able to direct that e-waste to these regions, you would expect even stricter regulations that Apple would have to conform to, because now that e-waste, which was being transported elsewhere, is closer to home. And all of this, it sets a precedent that there are regulations coming and there are laws which will be passed, which we have already seen a proof of concept of them through some fines that have been put on Apple. And by taking on these initiatives, instead of spending the money that you would be spending lobbying and then eventually paying fines, we're just asking you to be proactive with your approach, something that you already do in terms of designing your products. And we are essentially asking you to bring the same strategy to making sure that you do conform to these regulations. Because keep in mind, Apple has been a leader in this space for a long time. And being able to do business in the future also adds to your ability to continue being the force that you are today. And as a board, that is something that should be considered very critically, since all of these things are something that you are answerable to at the end in terms of investors. Since Apple is a public company, all of these things are in the spotlight and need to be considered even more.
Liam, I know you have some questions for these bright lights.
Yes. I'd like to ask a little bit more about the ethics of both the issue and the solution. With the right of repair, you say that once a consumer purchases a item, they own the right to repair that item. And yet when that consumer purchases the item, you say that we, Apple, still own the responsibility of the disposal of that item, and that does not necessarily shift to the consumer. I'm just wondering if you could expand a little bit more on how much of the ethical dilemma is owned by the consumer and how that is taken into account in your solution.
Yeah, absolutely. So I can start, and then I see Stephen wanted to say something, so he can jump in. But what we're seeing is the amount of iPhones and just general electronics that you're putting out into the environment is far outweighing the amount that is actually properly being recycled. So while, of course, there is that conflict of who is actually to own this, and a lot of this does also fall on the consumers, what we're seeing in our research is they feel that they don't currently have the different resources and the options in order to do so. And as somebody who plays such a large part in this ecosystem and has such a big role driving the industry, and with this market influence that you've been able to procure, there's really this onus on Apple yourself to set this new standard and this new precedent that we've seen you do with many different initiatives through your product building. So while it is an even divide, we believe that with the size of the company that you have, you are able to be that catalyst in order to change consumer behavior to act in this ethical and sustainable way.
Good. Do we have any other questions from any of the judges? I'm sorry, board members. No? Okay. In that case, I hereby tender my resignation from the board and return to civilian life. I thought you guys did a great job. I think these are very complex issues. You made it very approachable because you are that way. Your presentations were, it felt like you cared, and that showed through. I thought your slides were very helpful. And I think you did a good job.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you so much.
Feedback, judges?
My first feedback would be breathe. Remember to breathe. And you guys are the ones that know the most about your subject. So just always remember that. You're presenting something that you know better than anybody who's hearing you talk, usually. Usually, especially when you go to boards, we are sometimes sitting on a board and also have another job and also have something else going on in our lives. So when you come to us, you're highly specialized in what you're talking to us about. So don't feel intimidated by who you're talking to, because sometimes you will know more than the people you're talking to. So that would be my advice, is remember to breathe, and you are the experts when you're talking.
Thank you.
Liam? Oh, sorry, Sagar, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I think electronic waste is an increasingly urgent environmental and ethical problem, and you effectively connected the right to repair movement with the responsible e-waste management and sustainable development goals. I also liked your innovative proposal and the ethical proposal, but there are some areas for refinement. You could improve the numbers in the slide. You could, in addition to the policies that you talked about, you could incorporate more hard data on the true scope of Apple-related e-waste repair market potential. How big is the market, and the economic impact on countries receiving the e-waste? Because it's not just the US where the parts are recycled. There are certain countries in Asia and also in Africa. So talking about different countries and then categorizing the repair market based on the countries. And also the entire electronics industry, how can they adopt more sustainable practices if they go to recycling? But overall, I really liked your slides. They were pretty clean, and also the transition from one person to another was smooth. So good job on that. And good luck on the competition. I'll drop my LinkedIn in the chat. If anyone wants to reach out to have a conversation, I'm happy to meet and give you some more feedback.
Great. Liam?
Yeah, I thought that was really quite good. I was kind of shocked at the pure amount of material you were able to cover, and I really feel like the presentation itself helped that a lot. It was very clear and concise. And the other thing that I thought was really impressive is that you really hit the nail on the head in the beginning of kind of the ethical dilemma. It was explained quite well, and also in a way that wasn't degrading to the board that you're speaking to. You know, I feel like you did a good job of actually speaking as if it was a board. Because if it was a board, you wouldn't come in and say, you're all horrible, you're all doing all this stuff, you need to change. You do what you do, which is, you know, recognize what you do well, and then also the areas for improvement. So I thought that was really good. I think I'd also agree with Laura that, you know, it's tough. You have the 25-minute timeline. It did feel like a couple of slides were a little rushed. There was that one ethics slide that had all the ethical strategies and then just big X's next to them. And there was very little time spent on that slide, and I felt like that was maybe it would have been good to explain that one a little bit more, but you have a 25-minute, you know, time. I get it. But yeah, maybe a little bit too many slides, but overall, really, really, really well done.
Thank you very
So when we
much.
Thank you.
started, I promised that as judges, we would tell you a little bit about ourselves for some perspective, and I'm happy to start. I began my academic work at a small finishing school in central New Jersey. You may have heard of it. It's called Princeton. And then spent a couple of years living and working in the Peace Corps in Brazil, went on to law school at the University of Michigan Law School, and spent the final 15 years of my working life as the global ethics officer for a British aerospace company that really has been in the business since 1850, before there was aerospace. Somebody there built an altimeter for hot air balloons, so the pilots of the balloons could tell how high off the ground they were. And today they make something on everything that flies, even the International Space Station.
Wow.
Laura, do you want to go next?
I will be happy to. My name is Laura McKernan. I am originally from Honduras, Central America, where I went to law school. I also practiced law in Honduras for quite some time. I was a law clerk for the Supreme Court of Honduras, and I then moved to the US, went to Georgetown Law, so close to the professor. I feel like that's like the first part of my life. And then the second part of my life, I worked for different states who wanted to negotiate at the Organization of American States and at the United Nations. So I was one of the negotiators on the Sustainable Development Goals, which is why I know the negotiations are starting back up again. That's how I know. And then I became a professor. So I've been a professor since 2016. I've taught law, diplomacy, foreign affairs. I teach for the University of Defense, and I teach for a technical university in Honduras. I currently live in Colorado, which I feel is the next part of my life, I suppose, the next stage. And I am the executive director of a nonprofit in Colorado, working to have people who cannot afford attorneys be able to get an attorney. So that's what I do.
Good.
Thank you for having me.
Very cool.
Sagar,
Sure.
who are you?
So I'm an electrical engineer. Went to Cal State Long Beach for my PhD. I realized research is not for me. I wanted to go to a B school, so I finished with my master's in electrical. Worked for a few years for a Japanese company that made the fastest train in the world, the bullet train, also known as Shinkansen. So I was the design systems and integration engineer. Dropped out, went to UCLA for my MBA, started my own company. So I'm co-founder of a company called Blaze Power. It's a battery materials company. And I've been living in Los Angeles for about 8 years now, right next to LMU in Mar Vista. And it's a beautiful day today, enjoying the weather. It's not as cold as Colorado.
Liam.
Wow, I'd say my resume is certainly a lot shorter than the ones that precede me there, but I'm pretty fresh at undergrad. I graduated last year in the asset management industry. I trade bonds for an asset managed company here in downtown LA, Payton and Regal. And yeah, just last time, really great job, you guys. I felt like that was a really, really good presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just one final thought for the students. This is a wonderful opportunity for you to rehearse the kinds of presentations you will give for the rest of your working lives. And when you do, you will be the expert in the room. You should know more about the topic, as you did today, than the people you're presenting to, which is why they're paying you in the first place to come in and present to them. So good job. Good luck in the rest of the competition. Thank you.
Thank you very
Thank you all
much.
so
Thank you
much.
so much.